already from the get-go what you need to know about his channel and his content. He oversimplifies history, giving a very basic story time-like telling of historical events and characters, with the art style we all know and love. Now, presenting history in this entertaining and fun way is not the problem. If anything, today we definitely could use more of it. But
yeah, I was going to say, you shouldn't say it's not the problem. It's a fantastic way to get people interested into history, so it acts as a gateway. So it's not that it's not the problem, it's actually really good that 50 million people watched a little cartoon about the Romans, and then maybe they think, you know what, Roman history is actually interesting. I thought it was going to be boring. Let me go and study it. I think that's very good, to be honest. So it's not that it's not a problem, it's actually beneficial.
Is the specific way these oversimplified events and characters are presented that really bothers me. When it comes to simplifying a certain topic, as with really anything else, there is both a good and bad way of executing that. Standard simplification and oversimplification. We will focus on standard simplification first.
But standard simplification is not what he advertises. It's not simplified history, it's oversimplified history. I still kind of remain strong on that argument.
Let's imagine you pick up a dense philosophy book like Immanuel Kant's Critique of Pure Reason. Now, I'll give you a quote from Kant and let's see if it's easy to understand.
Nothing is easy to understand from philosophy, mate, particularly Immanuel Kant. I'm not trying to be a contrarian, but the philosophy, no, you should have used a historical. You can't use it. You could put mathematics, and then, of course, if it's high-level mathematics, or if you put Mandarin Chinese, I mean, it's going to be really difficult in itself. You should take history and then give an example with history. You're shifting the goalpost, you're shifting the post here. In other words, my critique here is that an analogy needs to fit. Like, look at this.
It is humiliating for...
So he's going to read the whole thing. I'm going to skip it. If you want, you can pause it and read it. But yes, we get it. It's a very complicated passage from Immanuel Kant, obviously.
Use at the same time limit the sophistical pretensions of every opponent, and thus it can secure its demands. How much of that made sense at first glance?
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either. Look.
Probably not much for the average reader, and...
Of course, yes, it's an advanced philosophical passage. But if you took an advanced historical passage that actually speaks about the, say, deep context of the Second Punic War, I think most people would still understand the words. With philosophy, oftentimes you read it, and at the end of the passage, you're like, do what? And you have to read it again. I imagine now he's going to offer his own version of simplification. Let's see.
That's completely normal. So let's try to simplify it. It's frustrating that...
Alright, so if you want, you can check it, but I think it's not a fit example. So whatever conclusion you draw is flawed in the first place because you're using philosophy. And even if you had used history, right, which you should have, and then you provided a good simplification, what you would be showing is not that oversimplified is dangerous, you would be showing that you can do a better job at simplifying than them, even if you were successful. Although then again, that would be a matter of opinion, of course.
Claims, so even into errors. Now, this simplified version gets the point across much better, right? But notice something. Though the language is easier to follow, the essence of what Kant is saying is still there.
Right.
This is the difference between simplification that helps understanding and oversimplification.
I think we have to have a look, as a linguist, we need to have a look at what oversimplification means, because if we are not clear on the meaning of words, then what you could do, I'm not saying that you're doing it willingly, I'm not attacking you, Lavender, but what you could do is that you could take your own personal interpretation or meaning of the word oversimplified and then use it as the standard. Is that what it means? Let me see. Now, it is true that oversimplify has a sort of negative aura to it, so I don't disagree that perhaps it would have been maybe better to say simplified history rather than oversimplified history as a matter of marketing and PR, but then again, the guy gets 50 million views per video, so can I really complain about it? But yes, person Lavender does have a point, because when we do see oversimplify and the definition, it says that it means someone is describing or explaining something so simply that what they say is no longer true, or make too simple. In other words, it's simplified to a point of error, distortion, or misinterpretation. Now, I do not misrepresentation. I don't think that's how they mean it. I honestly think they mean oversimplified as we simplified very much, but you do have a point. So this is a good counterback. As I say, I'm not here to be a contrarian. To oversimplified usually does have a negative aura, like he's saying.
In education, good simplification focuses on why something works or what led to a conclusion. It takes people through the reasoning without losing the details. It's not about dumbing things down or skipping to the end, but about leading people step by step. In history, it's pretty common for people to call certain figures geniuses or dumb for something they did. While you could argue that the action may not have been very bright, it oversimplifies complex motives, decisions, and events. Right. Was there something that happened that made them take that action? Was it really because they were messed up or wise in the head, or were there certain factors into play that they could not control? Let's imagine a general during an important battle who orders his troops to charge straight into enemy lines, even though it looks like a complete suicide mission. To most observers, it might seem like a reckless and dumb decision. In fact, future historians might label this general as incompetent, claiming that he had led his men to certain defeat without any strategic thought. But let's think for a moment. Why did he make that choice? There could be evidence to suggest that the general had received faulty intelligence earlier that day, convincing him that the enemy forces were much weaker than they actually were. On top of that, perhaps a crucial supply line had been cut off, leaving his troops short on resources. With no ability to sustain a prolonged battle, he thought that a decisive strike might be the only chance to turn the tide before his army starved or surrendered. Now, does this make his decision any smarter? Not necessarily.
Exactly.